Please stand. Our good news this morning has been recorded for us by Mark. When Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a large crowd gathered around him, and he stayed close to the sea. One of the synagogue officials named Jairus came forward. Seeing him, he fell at his feet and pleaded earnestly with him, saying, "My daughter is at the point of death. Please come lay your hand on her, that she may get well and live." Jesus went off with him, and a large crowd followed him and pressed all around him. There was a woman afflicted with hemorrhages for 12 years. She had suffered greatly at the hands of many doctors and had spent all that she had. Yet she had not helped, but only grew worse. She had heard Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. She said to herself, "If I but touch his clothes, I shall be cured." Immediately her flow of blood dried up. She felt in her body that she was healed of her. Jesus, aware at once that power had gone out from him, turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" But his disciples said to Jesus, "You see how the crowd is pressing upon you, and yet you ask, 'Who touched you?'" He looked around to see who had done it. The woman, realizing what had happened to her, approached in fear and trembling. She fell down before Jesus and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. Be cured of your affliction." While he was still speaking, people from the synagogue official's house arrived and said, "Jairus, your daughter has died. Trouble the teacher no longer." Disregarding the message that was reported, Jesus said to the synagogue official, "Do not be afraid. Just have faith." He did not allow anyone to accompany him inside except for Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When he arrived at the house of the synagogue official, he caught sight of a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. So Jesus went in and said to them, "Why all of this commotion? Why all of this weeping? This child is not dead, but simply asleep." They ridiculed him. Then he put them all out of the house. He took along the child's father and mother, and those who were with him entered the home room where the child was. He took the child by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." The girl, a child of 12, arose immediately and walked around. At that, they were all utterly astonished. He gave strict orders that no one should know this, and said that she should be given something to eat. The gospel of Christ. Praise be to you, O Christ. Please be seated. So good morning, everyone. On this humid Sunday here in the Northeast. I am a huge believer that Jesus' words and actions and the stories that are captured for us inside the Gospels are literally meant for us to be reflecting on how exactly God continues to work in our life today. That this Jesus, as the representation of God here on earth, fully embodies all the characteristics of how God really works and acts. And as such, because Jesus is taken away from us and is in heaven, and that the Spirit is with us, this God still acts and works the very same way that Jesus does. There is a meaning behind the stories, not just for our generation, but for every generation before us and every generation going forward. The purpose, the point of the Gospels is the good news, and the good news is specifically how God acts and reacts to his relationship and our interaction with him. We were out at dinner not too long ago, and the couple that we were with, he told me a story and pulls out his wallet, and he ends up showing me pictures of his mother and his father. Now, he holds these pictures and tucks them into one of the small slits inside his wallet, but he carries them with him all the time. And he said something that really sort of just hit me. He said at dinner, he said, I am their child. As you know, a couple weeks ago, Arthur had his celebration of graduation and turning 18 and getting out of the house party, going to college. And we had pictures taken, and we received them. And as I'm flipping through, I could not help but visualize and remember the dinner and the comment of the individual about his parents as I'm looking at pictures of my son, saying to myself, this is my son. I could not escape this week thinking that in some profound way, God also looks at us as his children, as pictures that he carries with him every single second of his existence, that he reflects on us with the same admiration, the same warmth, the same adulation, if you will, and excitement and enthusiasm that we are his children. You and I, we go through life and we are constantly barraged by a bunch of different voices. There are voices from society, culture, voices of our childhood, voices of situations and circumstances that have not been exactly the healthiest for us, have not been good for us. And then there are those personal voices that you and I carry all the time that we say to ourselves, whether or not we're good enough, we're tall enough, we're short enough, we're fat, we're skinny, whatever the issue is, we always have these voices speaking to us. And I'm just wondering whether or not we have the courage of this woman in this story to keep moving forward, trying to get close to and simply trying to touch the hem of Jesus' garment. Because I think when we encounter Jesus, we are changed, we are transformed. There is religion and then there is relationship. This gospel is about relationship. The gospel of Jesus, who Jesus is, what Jesus is all about, is one about relationship. And this story is incredibly profound, but let's put it into its cultural context. This woman is suffering from bleeding and hemorrhaging. And as a woman who is hemorrhaging, she would be considered unclean. Uncleanliness in Jesus' day not only forces this woman outside of society as we would understand it. She cannot be in public. She cannot be around other people. There are strict religious laws about a woman in her time of period and hemorrhaging, and so she would be isolated and ostracized because this is something that she has happening within her. Religiously, it is seen as an illness. Religiously, they look upon that and they see it as an illness, and there is this judgment that takes place. Is it her sin, or is it the sins of her father and mother that have been reaped upon her, and therefore she suffers? Illness, remember, in Jesus' day was understood as something that God permits because you have been found dishonorable, or you have been found a sinner, and so you suffer these things. This woman, for 12 years, had tried to find a cure, not only because of the physical complications and the illness and the fatigue that she must have felt from this constant bleeding, but because society and because religion dismisses her because she has this reality, this impediment, this illness that no one could take care of. I want you to focus, though, on the fact that she keeps trying. For 12 years, she goes to everyone and anyone she could find, trying to find a cure. And when people come to me and they say, Eric, I think I'm not going to do anything about this that I have. I'm just going to leave it alone. I'm sorry. That's not what we're presented. They'll say to me, I'm not going to go to a doctor. I'm going to trust in God. Well, no, that's not really what the story is, isn't it? This woman had tried everything she could try. And in faith, hoping, I'm sure her experience of God did not diminish during this time. Society abandoned her, but who did she have left? All she had was God. How do we know that? Because it is the faith that she has in this person, Jesus, which has to be inspired by a relationship with God, an understanding of God, a desire for God, a desperation for God, that this woman steps into a crowd. And anyone recognizing her would have been able to point out without a doubt that this is the woman who is hemorrhaging. This is the woman who is unclean. This is the woman who is not allowed in the synagogue. And now she is pushing through a crowd because she believes she has this much faith that after she has done everything she possibly can, that simply touching the tassel of Jesus' cloak, the hem of his garment, will restore her and bring her wholeness. And so she pushes through this crowd for fear, because if she's found out, they will throw her out and possibly even stone her. But she's out of all of that. She doesn't care. Because no matter what happens, she pushes through because she wants to get to Jesus. And people say to me all the time, my life is, a struggle. My life has been terrible. I've had bad experiences. I can't find a job. I can't do this. I can't do that. I'm depressed. And listen, all of that is absolutely valid. No one takes that away. And no one says that we should stop trying to find remedies for all of that. But there is absolutely nothing wrong with believing that this Jesus is walking with us through the process. Are we willing to push through our challenges and our dark times and our gray matter of our mind? Are we willing to push through all of that because we believe that if we simply touch the hem of Jesus, that we could be made whole? Now, sometimes that wholeness doesn't come as we expect it. We know that. We know that there are people who are sick, and we create prayer chains, and we ask God for his intervention, and we ask God to make it whole, and it doesn't happen that way. And you know something? Regrettably, sometimes we just don't understand. But the one thing that is clear in this woman's case, she knew that if she was close to Jesus, she was going to be transformed. And I would like to suggest that even if she got this close, and even if she did end up touching his hem, and if her bleeding did not stop, I firmly believe this woman would have been transformed, because she came in contact with that which is goodness, mercy, love, compassion, and forgiveness. She encounters that. She would have been restored spiritually in a way that was probably even more profound than the physical illness and ailment that she was dealing with. But here, for this matter, we have this woman presented to us as a woman who simply would not say no. She kept at it. 12 years. You tell me whether or not we have the gumption to go through our life struggling, trying to find and answer a cure, if we're willing to go through the work of developing a relationship with Jesus. Are we willing to push through a crowd to simply touch his tassel? And I'm talking about that activity that takes place down deep inside of us. That activity where we are drawing close to God, where we make time for God, where we push through, even when everything around us, every other voice says, this is useless, this is ridiculous, this isn't going to work. Why are we bothering with religion? Why are we bothering with a relationship with God? What are you talking about? This Jesus was 2,000 years ago. What value does he have today? This Jesus is dead. He's not alive. What are you preaching about? And I'm simply suggesting that I believe the Gospels are meant to be good news. And the good news in this situation is this woman simply would not take no as an answer. She wouldn't. She simply would not allow anyone to put her off from reaching and touching Jesus. And I believe that encounter of touching Jesus is something you and I every single day should be pushing for to accomplish and to achieve and to experience. That is not an isolated incident to 2,000 years ago with this woman. It's not. It's an example for you and I to remember that there was a woman who was in a bad way, who had an issue that was overwhelming her life for 12 years. And when she tried everything and she couldn't, she ended up pushing forward. And by encountering Jesus, by touching Jesus, she is transformed. And I'm saying to you, that is the good news, that this Jesus is still alive and well. His Spirit still moves among us. And we have a choice. We can sit around and allow everything to overwhelm us. We can sit around and we could allow our minds and our hearts to run in a million different directions. And we could find ourselves all worn out, beaten up, depressed. Or we can actually choose today to start the journey, to start pushing through the crowd of our minds, of our hearts, to reach Jesus Christ. Because the minute we touch the hem of his garment, we have a completely new understanding. We have a complete new transformation. And that transformation is however God so designs it to be. But the fact is, in faith, we have to make this journey. In faith, we hold on to everything we possibly can believe, and we keep pushing through. We keep pushing through because this woman is an example for each and every one of us, that if we go to task with Jesus, if we push through, he will be there. And the most important thing is, in the end, he turns and he sees her. See, that is the healing part. Because for 12 years, no one would see her. It's not just that her blood dried up. It's the fact that Jesus turns and he sees her, and what does he call her? Daughter. He calls her daughter. Relationship. And that was as healing as drying up the blood. And that is available to each and every one of us. If God so designs that our physical ailment is removed by his grace, God is free to do that. But the healing that is available is the healing that takes place here, which in my experience, from all the bedside deaths that I have experienced and been part of, that is the part that is more profound than even physical healing. Because at that moment when our bodies are weak and our bodies are meant to transition, it does tell us something. This isn't built to last more than 120 years. It's not. I think that's the oldest person. We're meant to have a transition. There's meant to be something that happens next. But at that point in time where you are transitioning, the healing that is most important is not the healing of the body. It's the healing and the warmth experienced by the heart. And I'm saying to you, we should not wait until we are pressed into that moment to experience that. That if you and I pick up the journey now and we push through to simply reach the hem of Jesus, there will be a moment, there will be a transformation, there will be an encounter, and you will hear it said, daughter, Son. God bless you.